Charged Show podcast, the Fully Charged Plus podcast. I must get that right. This is one of the things that I never really thought about when we started doing the podcast was the people we'd be able to get that we probably wouldn't make an episode about, or it would be very difficult to make an episode on the normal Fully Charged Show channel, just because it's not a visual thing, it's a scientific development thing, and that's very much what this episode's about, and it's critically important. So this episode I talked to Doron Myersdorf, who is the CEO of StoreDot. Now, a lot of you will have heard of StoreDot, I'm sure, because if you actually, maybe you won't. I mean, kind of transport and energy nerd like me, I've definitely heard of StoreDot. So they're an Israeli company that are developing extreme fast charging batteries. So there's a lot of research going on into batteries of all manner, not only for vehicles, but for grid level storage. So people who are developing batteries that are huge and heavy and not transportable, but incredibly cheap, that store vast amounts of electricity. That's one critical area. Another critical area is energy density. How much energy can you pack into a kilogram weight of a battery? And that is increasing a lot. This is something we discuss in here. But the one that StoreDot have really focused on, and it's very interesting, is the speed that you can charge a battery and not damage it, so that it has the same life expectancy of the batteries we use now in cars, which is extraordinarily long, I'll hasten to point out. But how fast you can charge it. And what they're talking about is 100 miles range in 5 minutes. And if you've never driven an electric car, that is quite extreme. 100 miles in a range in 5 minutes is, I can't do the maths. It's fast. It's very fast. Let's leave it at that. So, and they already have that technology working, and it's going to be introduced into a number of vehicles in the next few years. And what it means is when you charge on a 350 kilowatt charger, you can basically, it's let's say 10 minutes and you've added over 100 miles. Really a big change. 5 minutes, you've added 100 miles, really, let's be honest. And then, and it doesn't damage the battery, and the battery can cope with it. It can be charged again and again at those speeds. That's the development that they're working on. So that's what we're talking about today on the Fully Charged Plus podcast. And I'm very pleased to be doing that. And before we jump in and meet Doron, I just want to hand over to our glorious, gorgeous sponsors who make this podcast the possibility and allow me to have the joy and pleasure of talking to some really amazing people. So, over to our sponsors. My Energy is putting the I back into British innovation. My Energy is putting the I back into inventing the future. My Energy is putting the I back into inspiring a nation. Recharging the world with green, smart energy. Charge your EV with your PV and more. Visit myenergy.com and help to spark the green revolution. My Energy, driving the charge to a greener future. So let's get on with it. Let's meet a really amazing guy, very interesting guy, Doron Myersdorf, who is the CEO of StoreDot, the battery technology company that are on the path to change the world. Oh, Doron, this is such a thrill. Really nice to meet you, and thank you for taking time to come and talk to us at Fully Charged Show. It's really,
for having me.
Really good stuff. So, can we just do a brief history, your history, because quite a few of the things you've done in the past I've also heard about and used. So SanDisk, I know I've used some SanDisks. I've got one of the best little hard drives I have at the moment is a little SanDisk that the only problem with it is I keep losing it because it's so small and it contains so much stuff.
Right. Today everything is uploaded to the cloud, but it still uses flash memory. So flash memory was actually innovation by an Israeli company called M Systems that SanDisk has acquired. And we were doing all kinds of applications. And the first one was actually the thumb drive that allows you to store everything on your computer. And then we moved on to the SSD, the solid state drive that replaces the hard disk. This was a very exciting era. And recently, Western Digital, WD, has bought SanDisk for 19 billion.
Wow.
This was for exactly that product that started in Israel, where you replace the rotating hard drive with flash
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah. Because it is so, what I think is, I'm sure we'll come back to this, but one of the intriguing things that I've experienced at my great age now is how quickly some amazing new technology becomes completely normal. So
Absolutely.
now if I still have some spinning plate hard drives and I go, I must get that information off. I plug it in and I sit there and it goes, I'm going, why is it doing that? It's so slow. And
Yeah,
you forget. And that, when I got those drives, they were state of the art, cutting edge, brilliant,
exactly.
high
Yeah.
density storage. And it's
Just in the
extraordinary.
last decade, everything has been totally revolutionized. So,
Yeah.
think about films, right? To
Yeah.
take photos, they are totally gone, and nobody wants to be Kodak. That you kind of
No.
lose an entire market without seeing the revolution. So we're
Yeah.
actually going through this revolution now with batteries that
Yeah.
replace combustion engines, and people don't
Yes.
realize it's gonna be gone very soon.
It's happening already. I mean but I'm slightly intrigued, in a sense, by how much transferable knowledge there was from solid state drives to batteries. Is there a kind of a direct electrochemical connection between those two technologies?
So, not a direct connection, but for us, it was actually some kind of, I would say, an evolution of the thought process, where we were looking for materials that can improve flash memory. But we saw very quickly that they can actually support faster charging.
Right.
So we are talking about organic materials. We started with peptides. That these are, more like biological kind of origin amino acids, and they were part of the research for the Alzheimer's disease cure that started at Tel Aviv University. And
Right.
it evolved because we saw that you can store energy in these nanodots, we called them at the time, where they can actually be managed. The self-assembly of these molecules can be managed with some organic solvents, and we use them in the flash memory, but it was very difficult to implement in a semiconductor environment. But in batteries, it turned out that it can have a great value.
Right. Wow. Because that is, I mean, I think what is fascinating is and as an observer of these things, so difficult to work out which one is probably going to work. I mean, I can remember at least 8 years ago hearing a huge amount about aluminium air batteries, and
Right.
that you'd have cars with 1,000 miles range, and they charge in seconds, and and then you realize, oh, but once you've driven 1,000 miles, you've got to take that battery out and recycle all the material. There's a couple of drawbacks, but it does feel like that immense amount of different technologies and ideas is funneling down to really, say, half a dozen very plausible, one of which very clearly is what you're working on.
Yes, and we're actually building on the lithium ion technology.
Yeah.
So the Nobel Prize in 2019 of Good Enough et al. This is an amazing innovations that show how you can actually take lithium and store the ions of lithium in the graphite structure in carbon. But when these guys when they worked on the innovation, it was like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Speed of charge was not part of their design parameter. They just wanted to show that you can store lithium. And
Yeah.
it worked very well and very efficiently, but charging is slow.
Yeah.
What we are doing is we are building on this great innovation and adding a new parameter, which is fast charging. Because, this is something that always, and I'm talking about like 100 professors and venture capitalists that told me that this will never happen
Right.
because of the graphite. You cannot charge fast because of the resistance and all that. So I said, fine, let's replace the graphite with something that can actually accommodate fast charging. And this is how we came about silicon together with organic compounds such as these nanodots. And we created this organic compound together with inorganic semiconductors such as silicon that actually allows a very fast diffusion of the ions into the anode. It's the negative side of the battery.
Right. And I mean that. So, and this is. Can you give us some idea of the sort of the time frame that this has taken place in? I mean, how long have you been working on these batteries?
We're actually celebrating next month 10 years of
Right.
research. So this is, and we are talking 35 PhDs, a team of 120 people. So somebody just told me the other day, this is like 2 faculties of MIT, right?
Yeah.
Working in terms of research power, working all on one problem, which is the speed of charging. So this is really a lot of years of research that went into perfecting the fast charging capability.
Right. Is that so? I mean, I think the unique thing is that there's been, well, over the last, say, 10 years, an amazing increase in energy density, if nothing else, in batteries, and a massive reduction in cost. You know, those things have really been very noticeable, easy to, you know, the graph is very clear. It's just dropping. You know. But then speed of charging. I mean, I'll very quickly explain what a shock it's been. So I have a 2010 Nissan Leaf. And it's been in the Netherlands for the last year and a bit, having a battery changed. It's having a new battery.
Okay.
And the reason it's taken that long is because of COVID. It's nothing to do with the battery. Took 27 minutes to swap. That's how long it took. Wow. But it's been stuck there. I couldn't go and get it. They couldn't bring it here. Now I've got it back. The real shock for me is having been used to a Hyundai Kona that charges at 80, 90 kilowatts, a Tesla Model 3 that can charge at over 200. Mm-hmm. I'm used to them charging very fast. And then I go back in the Nissan Leaf, plug it in, and a rapid charger, and it takes forever. And it's so slow. And I'm going, oh, this is so frustrating. Whereas when I first had that car, it was like, oh my God, this is so amazing how fast this charges. You know.
Yeah,
but that speed of charging has been, in a way, the slowest change. You know, it hasn't been as big as the cost and the energy density have both been very impressive.
Right, and the reason is the resistance of the battery that hasn't changed so much. And you know, resistance is heat, and resistance is also safety concern. Because if you are trying to charge fast something that resists, then you basically build up this lithium, and it becomes metal, and it's called dendrites. You know, they can puncture a hole through the separator and create a short between an anode and a cathode, between the minus and the plus. And you know, eventually you start a chain of events that create an explosion. And we've seen this many times in batteries, like in Note 7 a few years back. And you know, so these things are dangerous, and you need to really replace the materials and work on the system to make sure that it's safe enough to charge fast.
Right. And I mean, that is because I'm intrigued to know. There's a few. I've got quite a lot of questions about this because I think it is fascinating. It clearly will be, you know, if a car manufacturer can launch their new model and say you can charge this one in 5 minutes, you know, you can add 100 miles or whatever it is in 5, and people go, oh my God, that's amazing. I mean, there's a whole other topic about the chargers that are capable of delivering that much power, but let's leave that to one side. But then it's the longevity of the battery. So, I mean, are you feeling confident that you'll be able to create a battery pack that can last as long as, I don't know, as an average one today?
Yeah, so the magic number is 1,000 cycles of charge and discharge. Now, each cycle, let's say, is 300 miles per charge. So if you have 1,000, we're looking at 300,000 miles of warranty for the battery. But even then, you know, it doesn't really die.
It doesn't switch off, does it? No.
It gets to 80% of its original capacity. That's the definition of a battery that needs replacement or something like that. And it can go to second life, so you don't throw it away. You don't have to recycle it. So in terms of the environment, actually, this battery is still alive. But yes, it's a huge challenge because we need to work on the essence of what are those materials that can actually hold the lithium. And this is where the innovation comes from. And this is why there is such a big jump moving from, let's say, graphite to silicon, because it's like a factor of 5 in the speed of charging, and also more energy. But
energy density is increased.
Energy density is getting better. We're actually looking now at 300 watt hour per kilogram,
right?
Which is a lot. It
It's
used
a
to be
lot,
like
yeah.
150 with graphite. So we double the energy and we like 5x on the charging speed. So
Right.
altogether, you get like a 10x benefit, which
Yeah.
is why we are saying, yes, 5 minutes, you will be able to fully charge your vehicle, which is exactly the experience of fueling.
Yeah, yeah,
And this is our goal, is to take care of what is called the range anxiety.
yeah,
Some people also add the charging anxiety,
yeah,
because you don't want to get to a charging station and see like 10 cars ahead of you. Each one
yeah,
needs, 20, 30, 40 minutes. You're dead, right? I mean,
yeah,
you don't want to buy a car that would be such a headache. So we
yeah.
are working on the number one problem for the adoption of electric vehicle, which is the charging problem and the range
Right.
anxiety.
But then, so when you are charging in, say, let's stick with 5 minutes at the moment. I have no idea what power the charger is delivering to do that. It's got to be a lot.
So we are looking at least at the 350 kilowatt
Right.
chargers, which is, let's say, in a Tesla supercharger today you have roughly 200. So
200.
we
Yeah.
actually need to keep improving on the
Yeah.
power of these charging stations, but these things are available. It's just a
They
matter of
exist now. I mean, I'm intrigued by that because I was assuming it would be like 700 kilowatts, but it is 350 will
so
do that kind of
you
speed.
would need 700 if you wanted, let's say, take a Tesla Model S and
Yeah.
it has a 100 kilowatt hour battery. You want it to fully charge it in 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Yes. You'll need even one megawatt of
Right.
charger. But
Yeah.
we are not talking about that. We are talking about this. Why I always talking, what you will get in 100 miles in 5 minutes. So
Yeah.
you have 5 minutes. How many miles will you get? So we are now aiming for 100, and it will keep improving. It will reach even 200 in few years. But we are
Right.
already demonstrating 100 in 5. We call it 100 miles in 5 minutes.
Yeah. No, I mean that is it. It is remarkable when you experience something close to it. So I drove a Porsche Taycan
Yeah.
to a brand new 350 kilowatt charger,
Yeah.
and it was brand new, and there were thankfully all the technicians were there with their laptops, and they'd never had a Taycan there, and we plugged it in, and nothing happened, and they were going through their laptops. And then we were kind of going, oh, is it working? We couldn't tell. Then I looked inside the car. It was working. And in the time it took me to walk around the car from when we heard it go, when it started,
Yeah.
it added 14 miles. Now,
Wow.
I'd say that was in some seconds.
Amazing.
It is absolutely, when you see that in real life, you go, that is extraordinary.
Right. And the challenge is to keep the longevity, as you said, so you can do this every time. Because
yes.
in
Yeah.
batteries today, really, it is not recommended to use this 350 kilowatt
Yeah.
every time because you'll kill the battery very quickly.
Yeah.
What we are showing, and when I'm saying 1,000 cycles, and we're actually getting very close to that, 1,000 cycles of each cycle is an extreme fast charging cycle.
Right.
So that's the innovation, is being able to optimize the materials so fast charging will be your normal behavior.
Right. Which, of course, then that does, I think, the critically important thing and a thing that's becoming more of a topic as the adoption of electric cars increases is the people who can't charge at home. Because actually my experience, and it's been over 10, 11 years, is that most of the charging I do is at home because it's easy and I can control it. I can make sure it's cheap. It's at night when the electricity is cheaper, all those things. And I do use the public charging network, but not as much. But if I lived in a city and my car was on the street,
Exactly.
and I had nowhere to park,
So most people don't have a home or a garage. Even if let's say, if you live in a new home that has only 6, let's say, flats, you still need a lot of power for the home to charge everybody. So there should be both models that you can charge at home slowly. This will always be slow because you're limited by the power that the grid can provide at home. But just the notion that across the street you can get 100 miles in 5 minutes. This is what can make or break whether you'll get the vehicle or not, because the experience is exactly like fueling.
Yeah. And I mean, just to really make sure I understand, so StoreDot absolutely focused on that issue rather than, say, batteries for other usage. Well, the one that really intrigued, the first one I saw was in the scooter, in the electric scooter with a detachable battery.
Yes.
And you charged that ridiculously quickly. I can't remember what it was. So what was the? I can't remember the story.
5 minutes, and we demonstrated the chemistry. So it doesn't matter whether you charge a phone or a drone or a scooter or a vehicle. At the end of the day, when the charging station is powerful enough, if the chemistry is adequate and can actually accept the power, so 5 minutes can be a full charge of either a small battery or a large battery if you have enough power to charge. So the idea in demonstrating the scooter was to demonstrate the chemistry of the battery. This is the same chemistry that we are now taking into the full vehicle. But, in terms of, where we are really making the impact on the world and on our planet and on the experience of the driver is actually in, let's say, a sedan, a car that can take your whole family and drive it. And we can do it with scooters too, but scooters is a much smaller market. It was easier to demonstrate. We are focused on the electric vehicle, full four-wheel vehicle.
But there was some mention I read somewhere about commercial drones. I can understand where it might come in useful there.
And drones also, I think it can be a great value proposition because you can actually eliminate the man in the loop, right? If the drone can automatically go into some station in 5 minutes being recharged and continue on its mission, then basically you don't have any downtime. But the problem again with commercial drones is that it's a very limited market. When you compare it to the automotive industry. So yes, we will probably deliver some solutions for the drones, but in terms of focusing a small startup like us, we are only 120 people. We need to pick a market that we believe where we can make the most impact. And this is also our partners such as Daimler and BP. This is where they want us to actually put most of our effort in.
Right. And I'm just assuming that there's quite a lot of interest in what you're doing from the automotive industry in general. I would imagine there's quite a...
Absolutely.
You get some emails, I'm guessing.
We're actually shipping batteries for testing, I would say, for like half a dozen OEMs of electric vehicles.
All right. Not just Daimler then, other manufacturers?
No.
I won't ask which ones.
No, we'll announce very soon.
Very good.
Additional agreements, yes.
Oh, that is really good. So then, in terms of heat, then, because that's one of the things when I was reading through the notes today and thinking I was talking to you, was because I live in the UK and it's generally quite cold and horrible, like it is today, really unpleasant. And if I do use a rapid charger, if I use a supercharger on a Tesla, every now and then in the summer, I will hear the fan going. Right. But then earlier this year, I drove down to southern Spain and I used a supercharger. I wasn't even thinking. As soon as I plugged it in, it sounded like the car was going to take off because it was a really hot day. Yeah. Fans going crazy, enormous amount of noise. I've never heard it do that before. Yeah. So clearly that battery was getting very warm when I was charging it on a hot day. So is that a thing you've had to deal with?
Yes, and I think both extremes are difficult for the battery. Either very warm. We had an approach from Dubai that they want to charge their cars in the open air. It is a problem, and this is also a safety concern because usually you get like about 10 to 15 degrees increase compared to the ambient temperature. So if your starting point is at 50. Yes. You get very quickly to close to 70 degrees. This is where the battery is actually getting not very comfortable, and when you need cooling and fans and all that. But there is also a problem in freezing temperatures or below zero, like let's say minus 20, even let's say in Moscow or in the East Coast, because the electrolyte freezes, and then the resistance is getting higher. But for us actually, this is easier because of the high power. It gets warmer very quickly. Right. So we are actually getting a byproduct of the heat that helps us with the fast charge. So the lower temperature for us is more a problem in the operation, less in the charging of the vehicle. But in high temperature, you would have to cool everything just because of the risk of flammability.
Right. But then I guess I'm assuming that you can still charge at those. You've designed the system so you can still charge at the high speeds, even if it is hot.
Correct.
I mean, basically, I think my question is: does your battery get slightly less hot than the ones we're using now when it's charging at those speeds?
So the answer is absolutely yes. The whole idea of moving to silicon was to reduce the resistance. It's called the porosity. The porosity of the ions insertion into the active material with silicon is much better, and you have much less buildup and much less resistance. We are talking about an order of magnitude less resistance with silicon compared to graphite.
Right. Because then, I mean, the other topics that we've covered a lot on this channel are, and I think the whole story has changed somewhat, but there was cobalt, which became a very contentious material in batteries. I mean, you're still using cobalt in the battery?
Well, so yeah, I mean, there are several, it's called the cathode side, it's the plus side of the battery, uses some cobalt, and the technology is called NMC, which is nickel, manganese, and cobalt, and we're using something that's called 811, so it's only like, 10% of the cathode is using cobalt, and we're actually moving to 9 half, so we're actually dropping it. The thing is with cobalt that it does add to the stability of the battery. It does add to the safety. But there is a lot of effort, and it's not only by StoreDot to remove cobalt altogether. Some solutions are talking about lithium iron phosphate, LFP batteries. These batteries do not use cobalt, but they have much less energy, say 20, 30% less. So this is a trade-off. I mean, the world, especially in China, is moving towards lower energy but no cobalt. But for the higher end implementation, at least initially, we will still use some cobalt.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, the simple fact is that, the contentious issue around cobalt was artisanal mining and clearly children mining. Well, I've just done a whole thing about that. There's been a documentary in the UK recently.
Congo is like
in the Congo, and the children they've stopped children mining. So it was a really big story 4 or 5 years ago, but it has now stopped, and the mining companies have. I mean, I think they were embarrassed, and they've kind of gone, this doesn't look good on on the annual report. Let's do something about it. Finally.
Exactly.
So it's less of a thing. But so then the other one, I suppose, which is equally important, is at the actual end of life, because I mean, I've just been seeing, in fact, the episode that goes out this week there's a really good example in there of second life batteries repackaged into a big container. It's a 500 megawatt hour battery, all that stuff, which is amazing. But at the end of that life, then they do need to be recycled. And I mean, I'm assuming you've thought about that as you've designed and built
this system. Of course. And it's, by the way, it's not only the cobalt, you have the nickel. Nickel is important. The lithium itself, is going to be more expensive. But I think the volume of recycling is still not there in order to really, make the economies of scale and actually making, I would say, good business out of recycling. And there are a number of startups, by the way, including Tesla, that are already looking at how all these batteries would be recycled. Again, for a small startup like us, I mean, we can't solve everybody's problems, but we do design the battery in a way that it will be easier to recycle. And of course, the minimum use of problematic materials such as cobalt.
Yeah.
And by the way, second life battery is critical also for the charging infrastructure, because, the grid cannot support, everybody at rush hour trying to charge in 5 minutes. Because, it's a huge peak. But you can balance this peak with some energy storage systems that actually are built on second life batteries that came out of vehicles, let's say in 3, 4, 5 years. So, over the next decade, there would be some, I'd say, staggering implementation of second life batteries and recycled batteries as the volume picks up.
Yeah. And I think I always want to point this out, even though it's a silly thing to say, is the day that I can see a litre of recycled diesel fuel, I'll buy a diesel.
That's a good one,
because there's not a lot of recycling going on in the oil industry. And I think that is but it is a critically important thing in the fact that we could, and I think it's going to be 20 or 30 years, reach a point where our need to extract new materials will be reduced. It'll never go away, but it will be reduced because we can reuse so much of the materials that we're already using.
The new buzzword is zero emission, or at least being balanced in terms of how many gas you actually emit and what you can actually capture. And there's a lot of work on carbon capturing and trying to balance what we are pulling out of the earth and what we are actually releasing to the air. And I think now that I think everybody understands that this is a critical issue, there's going to be a lot of the ecosystem effort, including, by the way, by companies such as BP that are changing their mindset. And it's not all about, upstream and downstream anymore. It's more about, how do we balance the emissions and control the climate. And this is critical because these big companies can actually make a difference.
Yes.
And investing in companies like StoreDot that are actually pushing the transition to electrification is a big step forward.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's critically important. I mean, it is the difficult, I find it almost delightful, the sort of pain of the oil industry transferring their energies from extraction and refining to, and it's not easy. I have a certain amount of sympathy, but every now and then you'll hear a story where you go, that's really wrong. They've done something very bad.
And they get it. I mean, they get it.
I think they do. I absolutely agree with you.
But they're still making a lot of money, so it's very difficult, to take the cash cow and transform it. But they have, for example, 18,000 gas stations that they understand that they need to repurpose all of them over the next decade to be also charging. And this is a huge effort that requires really many billions of dollars in investment, and they are doing it. And this is in order to allow, the electrification to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, do you feel confident then that? I mean, I feel I can see it because I've been watching this for so long, and like 10 years ago, a lot of people were talking about the tipping point, and at a certain point, people will accept electric vehicles and they'll go off, and there's all those graphs where suddenly the numbers go up.
The hockey stick,
Yeah, the hockey stick. Yeah. And I've been waiting for that for sort of 10 years. And just in the last year, I've gone, maybe something has actually shifted. Just visually, if you drive around the UK now, the number of electric vehicles you'll see is mind-boggling how quickly it's expanding.
Same here. I mean, on this street here, we have here Google and Microsoft and Apple across the street, but you see a number of Teslas that I wouldn't imagine last year. I mean, like every third car now is a Tesla here. It's quite amazing. But maybe it's not representative, but we did get thousands and thousands of Teslas in the last few months. And of course, it's not only those; it's the the Mercedes and the BMWs and the Audis. And people actually want it.
Yes.
It's not like you need to convince people. They see their neighbor, they see their friends, they talk to him, say, "Wow, it's a great experience." It's becoming viral. And in terms of cost, you're already there. You're already there, especially with all the new Chinese brands that are coming cheaper than Teslas and actually delivering a very good experience and good range. We are talking, 200 miles for a car that is maybe, in Israel, it's like $40,000. It's amazing. I mean, 2-3 years ago, you couldn't imagine just the battery would cost you that price, right?
Yeah.
So,
because that is actually a very important point, which was on my list of questions. But in terms of cost, do you think that the batteries you've developed are comparable with, say, what Tesla's making at the moment? Are they close?
Yes, we're looking at $80 per kilowatt hour.
Oh wow! Okay,
that's at the cell level. Then you have additional cost when you assemble it into a pack. But at the end of the day, so let's say the pack is $120. And so this is becoming reasonable. So the entire pack would cost $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. That's half of the vehicle. But a vehicle today is a battery with software. All the rest is commodity, right? Yeah. So if you have a better battery, a better software, you have a better vehicle. Right? So,
Now, and what about in terms? I suppose also. Because are you focusing really on passenger cars rather than commercial vehicles or delivery vans? We're
looking at the vans. The vans, it's important also for fast charging because think about the fleet, right? So let's say instead of having, 7-Eleven needs 1,000 vehicles in certain metropolitan area, but half of them are in downtime for charging. Yeah. So if you charge in 5 minutes, then your whole fleet can be reduced in size, like in half. Yes. So yes, definitely we are looking at commercial vehicles as well, and mostly the city deliveries, things like that.
And then in terms of size and weight and energy, well, you were saying about energy density is because I know that the kind of absolute top amount of energy density that Tesla claimed 260 watt hours a kilogram, and you're saying 300, so
correct.
Better than the best
current
Tesla.
Yes, but we are not in mass production yet, so when we will be in a vehicle, let's say 2024, it will be comparable. So I'm looking at where all the industry is going. So
where they'll be then.
Will be the same. So, the way to think about it is that everything is the same. Same weight, same volume, same cost, but we charge in 5 minutes.
Right.
So that's our goal.
Yeah. Because actually, you might know this. I mean, how many watt hours a kilogram the batteries in my original Nissan Leaf were? I can't imagine.
Yeah, this is closer to the 70.
Right.
10 years ago.
So it's gone from 70 to 300. Yes, that's in 10 years.
In a decade. Yes.
Yeah. No,
and the price drop. This is like it's like 90% price drop. So this is exactly like Moore's law in the semiconductor. Where my experience is from. That you have a very consistent year-on-year drop in the cost and increase in the number of transistors, and here it's the energy density. This is actually because there's so much research and effort going into improving these batteries that the rule is that if you invest so much, even though it's a very difficult problem, and semiconductor also is a very difficult problem, batteries is a difficult problem, but the investment in batteries, like in a big way, only started like a decade ago. So, if you look at the semiconductor industry for its 40, 50 years of evolution, we are only at the beginning of the evolution of batteries. So we are still with lithium ion as the best technology. We will move to solid state, and then we'll move to post-lithium, let's say even metal air or some other solutions that would triple the energy density. And in one charge, you'll get easily 1,000 miles. Right. And we'll get there in like a decade or so.
Because that's the kind of last thing I wanted to ask you is what you see as the next step, or where you think StoreDot will go. Let's say in 5 years' time, there's thousands of vehicles with your batteries in them. What do you do?
So we are focused on the experience of the driver, and in order to improve it, we keep tracking the miles per minute. How many miles you have a minute in the charging stations? How many miles will you get? So in order to keep improving on that, you can either improve the energy density or keep improving on the charging times. It's called the C rate, the rate of charging. So I think in terms of rate of charging, we are really pushing it to the limit of what is possible, because we've tried to do more and we see it's problematic. And we already replaced the materials, so we've actually took the toughest challenge already. So I think the next step will be really to move to batteries that do not require the liquid electrolyte, and because it takes a lot of the volume, and it's also not very safe. And you do have some companies already that have very high valuations. It's a big promise, but they're still far from real commercialization. So we also started, out of the 6 teams here, we have agile teams here, like in software. Out of the 6 teams, 2 are working on our next generation, which is solid state. I don't think it will be available before 2028, but it will double the energy density. Looking at the 550, 600 watt hour per kilogram.
Right. So that could mean you still build a car with a 70 kilowatt hour battery, but the battery is smaller and lighter. That's the big change.
Exactly.
Yes. No, that is extraordinary. I mean, it does feel like that is.
It also, by the way, it improves the efficiency of the entire vehicle, and this is why it will become more and more efficient to drive an electric vehicle compared to a combustion engine.
Right.
Let's say if now we're at the tipping point. In 10 years ago, there'll be no question. I mean, it will be, crystal clear that there is no reason to buy any combustion engine anymore.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it's a fascinating one which is why I was keen to talk to you. And I think certainly most of our listeners will be semi-aware, if not very aware, of the developments that companies like yours have made. But there's still a huge amount of people whose notion of a battery electric vehicle is accurate for about 2010. It's about 11 years out of date. And it's amazing how, because they've never experienced it, so why should they know? But I mean, it is extraordinary.
Yeah, like 2010 is is like a whole different era in this technology. Like, when we started, really, I was thinking about a smartphone. Why? Because people charged all night for a half-day use.
Yeah.
Right. So my first demonstration was actually a smartphone that charges in 30 seconds.
Right.
But when we worked with Samsung on that, because they were our first investors, by the time I brought the solution, the problem was gone.
Yeah.
People charged, in like 30 minutes, and it's a whole day of use.
Yeah.
So, you don't need 5 minutes or 30 seconds. But in the vehicle, it's a much bigger problem because the whole ecosystem needs to change to make it happen.
Yes. Yeah. No, it is incredible. And it's been a real joy talking to you because you explain things very clearly so that someone uneducated, such as myself, can understand. And that's a great skill.
But in different field.
But that is fantastic. No, I've really enjoyed. I'm now just checking my notes. But I think I think we've, covered everything that I wanted to cover, and that's a really good introduction. We will definitely be following your progress in the next few years. It's very exciting to see. And I mean, it's going to be so exciting when there is the first, commercially available production vehicle with StoreDot batteries in it. It's going to be a moment.
Early next year, we will start demonstrating the solid state solution. Even though it will be very small, but it will show the possibilities of solid state.
Right. Because I do remember we made a show quite a few years ago now, probably 6 years ago, in Oxford at the physics department where Professor Goodenough had worked in the 1970s. But they said, we've developed an experimental solid state battery. And I said, can we see it? I can't remember his name now. The lovely professor just pointed to a burn mark on the bench. He said that's where it was. It was a little bit hot.
So, yeah.
So that is, but I mean, that's.
Yeah. We'll actually,
do you feel? Can I just ask you? I mean, you feel confident that a solid state technology will come about? I mean, it is.
So there is some caveat here. When you say solid state, people think that there will be zero, let's say, liquid elements.
Right.
We are still looking at some gel electrolyte that would enable us to reduce some of the resistance in the interface between solid and solid. Because when you're trying to push the ions between two solids, many bad things happen. But if you just put a very tiny layer of gel that is like, so we can say it's like a hybrid or semi-solid. So I wouldn't call it 100% solid because it is also very difficult to fast charge it. And again, to keep improving on the experience of the driver, I need to keep improving on the fast charging as well. Yeah. So we will introduce some gel electrolyte element, but it will still be closer to a solid state than to a liquid electrolyte.
Right. Very good. I've got to. The more I hear about new technologies, the more I make an effort to stay fit and healthy because I quite like to see them in my lifetime. So I've got to stick at it. I've got to go to the gym again. That is fantastic, Doron. Thank you so much for talking to us, though. That really is good. And good luck with all your future ventures.
Thank you very much.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was fascinating. Doron was such a dude. I really loved talking to him. All the links to the stuff we've been talking about are in the description or show notes of this episode. But store-dot.com is their website. There's a lot of information there about what they're up to. They're on LinkedIn, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook. They're all over the place. Hopefully, we're going to hear a lot more about StoreDot. I think it's very interesting what they're doing. That is all, though. Please, the normal things. It's kind of annoying to say it, but actually it does make a difference. I've got to allow myself to be slightly annoying and boring. That's a thing that just comes with age. The subscription thing, please do subscribe to the Fully Charged Plus podcast. It helps us. It does cost you nothing. Please tell your friends and family. It helps us, cost you nothing. And you can have a look at the Patreon link if you want, but there's no pressure at all. But there is a Patreon link. And obviously, if you've come across this
podcast completely circuitously, as people might say, which I've met some people who found out about Fully Charged through the podcast, not through the long-running video program. I'm losing the plot a little bit. I'll get to the point. Some people don't know about Fully Charged Show on YouTube. And so if you Google Fully Charged Show YouTube, you will find it very, very quickly. There's now over 1,000 episodes, I think. I don't even know. Lost count. It's been going since 2010. So it's been knocking around for a while. Covers the entire history of the development of the second wave of the electric vehicle. First wave was about 1908. So that's it. So, have a look at that if you've never seen it before. There's some good stuff on there. There's going to be a lot more stuff. Of course, we've got our live shows coming up later this year. All information about that is on our webpage at fullycharged.show. And that's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for listening.